Hello, and welcome to She Leads Biotech, the podcast that celebrates women leaders in the bioscience space. I'm your host, Sharon Cox, CEO and Managing Director of CNA International, based right here in New York. And each week I'll be talking to women leaders about their work, their triumphs and challenges, providing invaluable insight into how women can unlock their superpowers and succeed on their own terms. So whether you're navigating your own career path in bioscience or you're passionate about science and innovation, I hope you're empowered and inspired by each episode.
Today's guest began life amid archaeology digs in Switzerland, spent her formative years moving between continents, and built a career at the intersection of public health, global equity, and surgical precision. From early interests in languages and architecture to a pivotal experience in a women and children's clinic in the Middle East, her path to medicine wasn't linear, but deeply intentional. After surgical training and faculty appointments at Yale, she leaned into her passion for global health, building surgical systems, advocating for equity, and partnering with NASA on sustainable operating solutions. Her work in transforming pediatric surgical access in some of the world's most challenging environments, from refugee camps in Kenya to war zones in the Ukraine. She now leads a global team committed to ensuring every child, regardless of geography, has access to safe surgery. Please welcome Chief Medical Officer of Kids Operating Room USA, Maija Cheung. Hey, Maija, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. Now, I know you originated from Kansas, right? Dorothy country.
Yes, Dorothy country. Many a Wizard of Oz joke to be had of.
I bet they have. And so when did you, and you're now in Connecticut?
I am, yes. So we actually moved around a decent amount when I was young. I was born abroad. I was born in Switzerland. My mom was a archaeologist on a dig. My dad Hong Kong, so we spent summers in Hong Kong, and then actually for a while I lived and went to school in Beijing, China, when my mom was also doing some archaeological work. So we lived in New England for a bit, and then the Midwest, and finally made my way out to the East Coast for college and everything after.
Oh, impressive.
Yeah.
So you're a surgeon. How did that happen? Was it something that you always wanted to do? You'd always wanted to be a doctor? Did you pick it? Did it pick you? How did it come about?
Yeah, a little of both. I was always very interested in technical things. Growing up, I played the violin. I used to knit and sew and do kind of very fine needlework. And I worked a lot with miniatures when I was younger. But I grew up in a household that really valued the liberal arts education. So I wanted to study languages and architecture and kind of all things, just get a very broad exposure in college. And I went to school on the East Coast. And at that point, I was really thinking like Italian and architecture. And my second day of college was September 11th, 2001. And I decided that I really should learn something about the Middle East. We were a big language family. I'd studied multiple languages as a child. And so I spent a lot of time studying Arabic and political geography and religion, and then went abroad to the Middle East actually after college to explore that further and work on my language skills. While I was there, I started working in a women's and children's health clinic, and so was exposed to a bit of the issues, broader issues in public health and global health. And when I came back, I worked for a law firm for a bit, actually thinking that maybe that was the direction I was going to go. But I've always been the type of person who liked making progress, liked crossing things off lists and feeling at the end of the day like I'd accomplished things. And I realized the legal system was not for me. And working in the health clinic and then also on some legal cases that were very health related, that was really what then kind of drove my interest back into medicine. And I did a post-bac and a lot of other work before going to med school at the NIH and things like that to just get a bit more exposure. So I picked it. It picked me. A little bit of luck and timing, I guess.
Okay. And so how long, I have no idea. How long do you spend in medical school these days? It seems like it's forever that you have to go through.
It does seem like forever. The training is ongoing. I think that's why we all call it like continuing medical education. Medical school itself is 4 years. Many of us, including myself, do a fifth year. So I did a fifth year at Dartmouth that was really focused on global health. Jim Kim, who became the president of the World Bank and who's one of the founders of Partners in Health, which is a wonderful organization that's been in existence for a while now and really like the grandfather organization in global health. He was the president at Dartmouth College when I was there, and there was a big earthquake in Haiti. I helped on a lot of the disaster relief projects, and then I decided to take a specific extra year working in Peru, very focused on building systems and building collaborations with some of the medical systems in Peru, and did a full year of that type of work. So in general, med school is 4 years, but as I said, a lot of us take a fifth year. And for me, that was really formative in also trying to determine the kind of role I wanted to have in residency, after residency, and for my career.
And that's actually, we'll talk about that as we go through, but I think it's very obvious as we unpack those things where you were destined to be and where you're kind of at your happiest. Once you left medical school, where did you go to practice? I guess that's the word, is it? That you?
Yeah, so I did my
That was
residency
awful to say. Where did you go to practice?
I know.
It's like, I know
I
what
know.
I'm doing.
The patients, I'm sure, are really thrilled with that, whoever came up with that term. I did my residency at Yale in New Haven, and then I stayed on after residency. Many of us do fellowship, and I did my fellowship at Yale and then stayed on as clinical faculty. And while I was at Yale, so surgery residency is 5 years, and many of us do another year or two of kind of postdoctoral fellowship work while we're still residents. And so I took an extra year doing global surgery. And I worked a lot in Africa and Uganda specifically. So 6 years of surgical residency, a year of fellowship at Yale, and then stayed on as clinical faculty. And I was a full-time practicing clinician until about 15 months ago when I switched roles to a chief medical officer role with the charity that I'm currently with, Kids Operating Room. But I do still hold a adjunct appointment at Yale in the Department of Surgery. I still see patients a few times a month and operate at our Veterans Hospital in West Haven. So it's a great way for me to continue to stay engaged with the residents, continue to operate and give back to the community because the veterans population is definitely one that I value very highly, can really utilize extra specific expertise that I can offer.
Somebody of your skill and experience, I think you might actually be the first surgeon that I've actually spoken to in this sort of surrounding. So my view of doctors and surgeons is very Grey's Anatomy and The Pit
Yeah.
and whatever TV show I happen to be addicted to. But you could have, been a surgeon that sees the elite of people and make huge amounts of money being a specialist in a field. But you've almost chosen, even at Yale, that Yale to me is a very prestigious establishment, and I imagine that anybody that you would see there would be a Yalean or whatever they might be called. But you don't. You work very much with under-resourced and people who don't have resources and don't have funds. That I get a feeling is very much a choice thing for you.
Absolutely. Although Yale is an amazingly prestigious institution, one of the reasons I picked it for residency as opposed to staying at Dartmouth in the Upper Valley was because of the population that's also served in New Haven. So there are a lot of lower socioeconomic background patients. There are a lot of migrant populations in the area. There are some real challenging areas around New Haven that have a lot more violence, for example, stabbings and shootings and domestic violence even. And so there is a population there that has access to care through Yale, but that is not in that high socioeconomic range. And that's always been something that's been important to me to make sure that we're providing access to those communities, something that was driven a lot by the work I did in global surgery and my time living in China and in the Middle East. And so this was a nice place for me to do my training where I got to take care of a variety of the range of patients that I really care about. And then obviously the global health work that I do, as you said, is very much focused on low resource populations, low resource areas in general, and what we as a society can really do to make an impact in those communities.
Being a woman in the medical sector, are there any stories you can share? How was it for you coming through that system?
Yeah, I mean, surgery it has made a lot of strides in terms of gender equity, but it is still not at the top of the list. There's a lot of implicit and explicit bias that you face as a woman. Everything from kind of persistent challenges and lack of female mentors and role models, having female mentors and role models and male mentors tell you that it will be harder for you as a woman, tell you that the divorce rate is 50% in surgery, tell you things like you can't have everything as a woman. And um, hearing those things constantly is very hard to overcome, especially when you hear them from people you believe to be allies and mentors. So, I actively sought out people of both genders who just believed in my potential, really championed equity, and then over time have made a point to do that myself, to mentor and sponsor younger women. And then, on a daily basis, there's obviously challenges in clinical rotations or early in my career where maybe my competence was questioned, not because of my performance, but simply because of my gender or where I was thought to be the nurse and not the surgeon. And I think that rather than let it discourage me, I tried to always just let my work speak for itself. So be prepared, be focused, be unshakable, focus on my talent as a surgeon, the clinical skills, and try to just help shift those perceptions. Sometimes you have to call more attention to it, especially now as a faculty member. If I have a resident who's on the receiving end of something like that, the more explicit bias, making note of it, but also not letting that become the kind of all-consuming event that happens in a patient interaction, I think is really important.
Yeah, so you don't want that to almost define the patient experience or
Right.
even the surgeon's experience, right?
Right. And, I think it's in some situations, it's really important to acknowledge and then set the boundaries, communicate clearly. You have to really try to maintain that trust and communication with the patient. And if you do let it become an all consuming moment, then that trust element can really break down. And, ultimately, as surgeons, we might be given only 10 minutes, for example, to build that level of trust with the patient and their family for an emergent surgery. And so it's really critical that we are all in the same place before starting a case that could have, a life or death implication.
Yeah. And people leaving egos at the door kind of thing.
Yes. Leaving egos at the door, myself included, which is hard as surgeons, right? We're all pretty type A personalities where we like to be in control, we like to be in charge. But, constantly being in an academic teaching environment, I think is really helpful in that regard because I learn from my residents just as I hope they learn from me, and being able to hear how other people might do it or being open to new ideas, just like in any type of profession, is really important. And so I think that helps keep the egos in check a little bit and also have that level of trust and rapport. And for women in surgery, specifically in our trainees, we're very lucky. About 50% of the classes we're now bringing in are women. And I think the key is keeping them in the surgical field, helping them succeed in fellowships that are more demanding. A lot of women, as you might imagine, go into things like breast surgery or endocrine surgery, ones that are maybe a little less challenging from a lifestyle perspective, but really making sure that we're encouraging female surgeons to pursue whatever it is specialty wise that really drives them and that they're passionate about, and making sure that we as a surgical community acknowledge and address certain things that might be more challenging for women, like family planning, maternity leave, all of that.
And just out of interest, just so that I can maybe keep your phone number in my book, what sort of surgery do you do?
Sure. So I did a fellowship in bariatric and minimally invasive surgery. And what that means is obviously weight loss surgery, but a lot, basically anything in the abdomen that's not cancer. So I do a lot of hernias, gallbladders, appendix, special types of hernias where the stomach is up in the chest, and robotics, and especially. So I did a special training in robotics.
Is that where you kind of use
It almost looks like a gaming console. Yep. So it's interesting how just like Grey's Anatomy has, I'm sure, influenced everyone's view of what it's like in an operating room, how certain movies and TV shows have influenced the view of the level of control perhaps that a surgeon has during a robotic case.
Yes. So when you say to the patient, well, I'm just going to pop off and get a cup
Yeah.
of tea. And
Don't
when I
worry.
come back, you'll all be done. It'll all be fabulous.
Exactly.
Not quite the same. You've been doing all of that, and then 15, 16 months ago, the opportunity to join Kids OR. Now, for people who don't know Kids OR, what can you tell us about it,
Sure.
about its work?
So Kids Operating Room has been in existence for about 8 years now. We build solar-powered pediatric surgical facilities around the world. We have done 100 now in 35 countries. I met the group that became Kids OR about 8 years ago, 10 years ago now, actually, when I was working in Uganda as a resident. And there was an idea by them to do one single operating room and call it a day. And due to a variety of factors, including the incredible vision of our founders and their dedication to access to care for children around the world, they formed the foundation. And I've been working with them all along, just in a variety of different roles. So since the very beginning, in an advisory capacity, helping figure out which sites we should do infrastructure work in, different training programs, development, some research, and then kind of one day a week as a medical director, essentially, and then 15 months ago as the chief medical officer for the whole organization. But in addition to the global organization, we founded Kids Operating Room USA about 3 years ago, and that is really as the fundraising arm, and I lead the USA branch as well as my chief medical officer duties for that organization.
Keeps you pretty busy.
It keeps me very busy. I work very broadly across the organization, as you might imagine, in those roles, but it's a fantastic way to utilize my skill set to have a broader impact. And really, that's what drove me to make the decision to become less clinical and really focus on Kids Operating Room and my role there. And we also do a lot of training. So we support scholarships for training surgeons and anesthesiologists and nurses. And obviously, with my background in the academic surgical realm, that was really important to me because there's a lot of really wonderful, dedicated, trained providers out there. But in some of the countries we work in, there might be one pediatric surgeon for a country of 40 million and 25 million kids. So building up that health workforce is just as critical as providing the infrastructure for people to work in.
What are the key countries that you work in?
So 35 countries globally, some really challenging places, a lot in sub-Saharan Africa, but we've done projects in Afghanistan. We're doing a project in Pakistan. We've done the world's first pediatric surgical facility in a refugee camp in northern Kenya. It's the third largest refugee camp in the world. Haiti, Congo, Somalia, some really challenging conflict zones. We've done work in Central and South America. Obviously, besides Haiti, we've done Peru and Ecuador. And right now, the two projects that I've been really focused on are one in Brazil and then one in Ukraine. We're about to open 6 operating rooms for children in Western Ukraine. Probably they'll open in end of July, beginning of August. And that's been a really critical project that I've been leading on for the last year.
Yeah. And I have to say to anybody listening, watching the podcast, please do go check out the website and just look at the incredible work that this organization does, because children, I mean, it's all children, right? It's all pediatric things, and they decorate the rooms in beautiful colors to minimize the scary part of it. I mean, it really is incredible work you do that's there. Can you tell me a story? I know I'm going to put you on the spot here, but
Sure.
can you tell me a story that for you kind of made it all worthwhile? You know, that one sort of, this is why I do this.
Yeah, I mean, I tell this story sometimes because I think it really encapsulates a lot of what we do. And I also think it's important to note that a lot of the places we work, the pediatric population is 50% or more of these countries. So it's not like it is in the US or the UK. And addressing pediatric surgery is really addressing population health. And actually, surgical conditions kill more people every year than HIV, TB, and malaria combined. So we're talking about a massive impact on population health. But at the refugee camp in northern Kenya where we work, there was a boy who was born with club feet, something that in the US or the UK could be very easily treated over a few months with some casting and minor procedures. He didn't have access to that. He was a refugee from South Sudan. And so for years, his family members carried him everywhere. Just he was completely unable to walk. And if you think about what that means for a child, not socializing, not going to school, for the family and the impact on them in terms of having to be a constant caregiver. There's a really big education and economic impact that has. But through the operating room we installed at the Kakuma refugee camp, he was able to get the surgeries that he needed to fix the club feet, and he now plays on his kids soccer team, wears his Man U jersey and wants to be a professional soccer player. So, that really speaks to, I think, the impact and the downstream longevity of what interventions like this can have. He can go to school. His family doesn't have to, care for him full time. They can be economically productive, and the social implications of that for someone like him, and the hope that ultimately gives him and his family and the people around him, I think, is huge. So I think for me, that's always been one of the stories that's been most uplifting and kind of hits on multiple points of what we're trying to build through these interventions.
Also, I mean, the flip side of that is how many can't be helped. And so therefore, I think that's probably what keeps driving you all at Kids OR to say we need to open more. We need more surgeons coming through. We need more people so that we can help more children, because a lot of the conditions that these children suffer from in the UK and in the US most certainly would be an easy fix, right? They're not
Yeah, no,
it's not difficult to fix a lot of these situations, but there's just not enough resources to be able to help the sheer amount of people that are involved.
yeah, absolutely. You're definitely correct. And it's that gap in access to care that we're really trying to address, and in a way that is sustainable and complementary to the health system. So by not sending teams from abroad to do the work, it means that when there is a local conflict, for example, in Haiti, where there's no global aid organizations working at the moment because it's just too dangerous, or in Congo, our facilities are still running and they're still helping children at full capacity because they're run by local teams who are not dependent upon us sending people. And our operating rooms in Port-au-Prince are two of the only that are still working at full capacity in the area because that's the case. So we really are trying to be thoughtful about the intervention as well, so that it will long outlast the charity if something happens to us. And ultimately, we hope not to be needed at some point. If we're no longer needed, that will be an amazing moment because it means that that infrastructure and that access to care exists. And I think sometimes people think that it's very complex or that it's very expensive to invest in global surgery or to do these things. But there's been a lot of work disproving that over the last decade. And we know that actually basic surgical care like C-sections, hernia repairs, broken bones, it only costs like $6 to $30 a year, what we call like healthy life gained. So that's cheaper or right in line with things like vaccinations and HIV treatment, which the global community seems to accept are very cost effective. Really, not investing in surgery has been shown to be incredibly economically detrimental to the globe. And, um, we can't not afford to invest in global surgery, is what I really tell people.
Right. Wow. That's okay. NASA. What's going on with you guys at NASA?
So, about 3 years ago, we developed a solar surgery system to power all of our operating rooms as the primary power supply. Obviously, you and I probably freak out when we lose power for an hour in our homes, but imagine a clinical situation where operating rooms lose power 3, 4 times a day while children are undergoing surgery. I mean, the catastrophic effects of that really can be devastating. We developed this and we implemented it in our operating rooms as the primary power supply and have been talking about it a lot over the last couple of years. I was talking about it and at a forum on oxygen and on sustainability in low resource settings. And as one does when one gives talks, you frequently get email follow-ups afterwards. And I got an email from a nasa.gov email, which intrigued me. So I followed up. And over the course of the next 6 months-ish, we developed a relationship with one of the biomedical engineers at NASA who was reaching out because they had created some very interesting technology for the space shuttle. historically, in order to create oxygen on the space shuttle, they had to bring large tanks of water and break apart the molecules. And so clearly, the definition of a low resource setting, I would think, is the space shuttle or the moon, Mars. And they were interested, though, in seeing what applications that might have in practicality for low resource settings on Earth. And obviously, as a deliverer of infrastructure in some of the world's most challenging settings, I think we were a very natural collaborator. And so we've been collaborating with NASA, American Oxygen, and Novair, and Public Intention, nonprofits in the US, to really try and test a pilot of this new technology, which is a oxygen generator with essentially no moving parts that we think requires very little biomedical engineering maintenance, and where we think about a suitcase size generator might actually provide enough oxygen for a small district hospital. So it could be a real game changer. And we are just thrilled to be collaborating with this group and have applied for some grants and things to help push it out of the pilot stage to make it a reality. But I think it could be an incredible opportunity to show what technological advancements can really be reframed in a way that might benefit kind of the hardest to reach areas here on Earth.
Right. And I just want to ask one thing, but I don't want to get too wrapped in anything political or whatever, but what's your fundraising strategy? How do you secure the funds that enable you to continue to do this amazing work?
Yeah, so obviously in today's landscape, it's more of a challenge. In some ways, we were lucky we didn't have massive grants that we lost. We did lose grants that were not insignificant. And we have really relied on trust and foundations. We are partners with the Elma Foundation, with the Patchwork Collective, Smile-Trained, Johnson & Johnson Foundation, other nonprofits like Smile-Trained, as I mentioned, and then some really amazing, impactful donors who are able to create impact with a personally meaningful gift that could fund an entire operating room. So our focus has really been on those kind of key cohorts. I think sometimes people think, though, that they have to give a large amount to make a difference. But, even a small donation can help equip a surgical team, provide essential tools, keep an operating room light on. So every contribution really adds up to something life-changing. And we work really hard to make sure that every donor, no matter the size of the gift, can see the impact that they're making. Right. And so everyone really deserves to feel connected to the difference they're helping create. And hopefully through, the ability to amplify our message with some key partners, we'll be able to continue to do that. But it is a challenging landscape right now. And we're lucky to have some great partners and supporters. And we're just fighting the good fight on a daily basis.
You're out there as a team fighting the fight as well, right?
We are.
I mean,
Yes.
you're all over the place with all different tasks and things that keep building that out.
Yeah, no, we have a fantastic team. I've been building up a team in the US. We have an amazing team in the UK. The US and UK collaborate, daily on a variety of these fundraising projects and other things. So we have team members globally all over the world. And we have partners, I think, who are willing to also advocate for us and introduce us to people who they think might want to learn more. And really that's what it is. It's always an open invitation. We love to build more collaborations and know more people working in similar spaces. But yeah, it is a massive team effort to keep something like this going.
Yeah. And I can say honestly, from knowing you and knowing Kids OR, that you do amazing work. And so let's hope we can encourage more people to support the work. Go check out the website and support the work.
Thank you.
So what does the future look like for you, Maija? What's do you have next stage dream? I mean, obviously you're a bit busy at the moment. I get that. But what do you see 10 years down the road when Kids OR is no longer needed because everybody's being self-sustained? What is your dreams for the future?
Yeah, I mean, from an organizational perspective, I've been thinking about it a lot, building out kind of the ideal organizational chart and what does that mean, not so much for myself, but for my team. How do I see them growing and how do I see us expanding over the next 5-10 years? I think that's really critical, is not to be too in the weeds about the day-to-day details and still have that strategy so that we can really lean in. I think I've always I'm a planner as a surgeon. I'm always a planner, not a big person on surprises, but I've always tried to be open to the idea that new opportunities will arise. I wouldn't have expected to put myself in the current role that I'm in if you'd asked me 10 years ago.
Yep.
So, but opportunities present themselves. Global pandemics change the way we think about healthcare, both for ourselves and in our communities and globally. So I think just being open to whatever is coming next for Kids Operating Room and myself. But I'm really right now excited and focused about the building that we're going to do as an organization over the next few years. It took us 8 years to do 100 operating rooms, but we want to do the next in half that time by 2030.
Okay.
And
Yep.
I think it's important to keep in mind that those big goals and inspire to achieve them. And let's see what other new collaborations with NASA and others, come up to help us get there.
Yeah. And I think that's it really, isn't it? It's being open. I think, I've spoken to people and said, what's and they're like, so, well, in year 5, I want to do this, and year 6, I want to do this, and we've yet to find out whether that actually happens. But I think your approach of, I just want to be open to seeing where things can go, because medicine changes all the time as well, right? New ways of doing things, even the type of surgery that you do. You know, 10 years ago, maybe people would still be like sliced and diced and,
Yeah.
I know a friend that needed to have a hysterectomy recently that was so much. And I remember being, when I was a kid, our next door neighbor had a hysterectomy and she couldn't get off the couch for 6 weeks to do anything or go anywhere. And, her kids came and stayed with us and bits and pieces like that. So it's all changing all the time. And it's being ready for those changes and being able to jump on those opportunities, I think, that both personal, professional, will actually help along the way.
Absolutely. And I think that, as you said, robotics is a perfect example. Early in my training, very few people were doing it. It's not something that was a requirement for us to know how to do before we graduated. That has changed completely.
Yep.
And I think that there's a lot of exciting things that we can't even aspire to conceive of at the moment that
Yep.
might
Yep. What
relate
they all do.
the whole innovation piece, but that's exciting, right? It's really interesting to think how we do the current work that we do might change completely within a decade, and being open to learning about that. And I think is what's also going to keep things interesting for me, but keep Kids Operating Room at the forefront of what we're doing and make our work so successful and impactful, is by being able to be resilient, be innovative, adapt, all of the kind of soft skills that people
Yep.
talk about.
Be ready.
And be ready. No, absolutely.
Yeah, I noticed I've been working over the last sort of 12 months within the cell and gene therapy space. And that is, not that long ago, that whole thing was science fiction. And now more and more is fact. And it's some incredible things going on. So, it's, as you say, next step is literally just around the corner. Well, whatever it is, I know you'll be amazing at it. So
Thank you.
you'll be there ready and taking on the challenge. So what advice would you have for somebody considering a career in medicine at this time, or who's already within the medical field and maybe is exploring how to use their skills and use their work in other ways?
I think the biggest piece of advice, which also really drove me to where I am, was to be introspective and not let preconceived ideas about what is or isn't possible drive where you think you need to go. When I entered the surgical field, a lot of global surgery was really focused only on trauma surgery or orthopedics, and not even surgery. When I was in medical school, I think there was a prevailing sense that if you wanted to do global health work, then it should be infectious disease work. And I think that you have to think about for yourself, what drives you? What are you passionate about? What do you find satisfaction in at the end of the day? Because no road is going to be without challenges. No road is going to be one that you want to continue every day. We will all have moments where we want to quit. But if you think about those big things that are important to you and that will drive you, and not be too constrained by what you think things must look like, then I think you can create an amazing career that you'll be incredibly satisfied by. And so that's what I would say. And I think that the medical field is enabling a little of that right now. There's a lot more focus on wellness and balance, and we're doing things that are more of the traditional, non-operative technical skills. And so pushing those boundaries in whatever realm it is that's important to someone, I would encourage them to really pursue. Medicine's a challenging place right now, post-pandemic. It's a very business-focused world, not always patient-focused. And so I think just trying to remember what it is that drew you into the field and what it is you are personally trying to achieve is really important, because I think it's easy to get lost in today's health systems in some of the things that maybe aren't or shouldn't be as important on an individual level.
Yeah. I have to say that's, well, apart from the skill that I don't have, would be one of the reasons I don't see I could ever go into that medical field, because it's so, sometimes it's almost like being in Washington, isn't it? There's so much political areas and there's so much, constraints with this and fighting with insurance companies when you just want to be able to help a patient and having to kind of take all that. And at the end of the day, it's be focused on the job and just do the very best that you can for that patient at that time. And try to keep that patient-centric philosophy that it's all about the patient, and try and brush out the noise of everything else around.
Yeah, it makes doing the prior authorizations to the insurance company is a bit more bearable when you have that patient. The ultimate goal is kept in mind of being able to care for the patient. For sure.
Well, listen, thank you so much. I know we've been
That's my
talking about
pleasure.
this for a while to try and get you on to talk to us. And you've been all over the world, busy. So I'm really, really grateful that you've taken the time out to talk to us. Kids OR, Kids Operating Room, fabulous organization. And I wish you and them continued success in the fabulous work that you're doing. And I do encourage anybody who's watching this to go check out their work, because it really is incredible. So thank you, Maija, for joining us today. And I wish you continued success.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Sharon. I really appreciate your support of us as always. And always here and around if anyone wants to reach out.
I'll send them your way.
Thank you.
Take good care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. She Leads Biotech is brought to you by CNA International USA, a woman-owned boutique search firm based in New York. If you're looking to hire talent for your company or want support in achieving your career goals, please reach out to me at contact@cnaint.com. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And remember, the success of every woman should be an inspiration to another. So don't be afraid to share yours. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.